This is Jerome Corsi, and today it's Monday, October 9th, 2023. We have a new Israeli war with Hamas this time, and it started over the weekend with a series of horrific attacks that were launched by Hamas from Gaza that killed civilians who were attending festivals, people in the streets, knocking on doors, coming into homes, killing everyone. I mean, it was horrific and shocking to the nation of Israel, of course, and shocking to the world. It was a attack like Israel's 9/11, it was being called. And of course, I watched many videos on it over the weekend, and one in particular of Carolyn Glick, who I've known over the years. She is a senior reporter, a columnist for Jerusalem Post. I attended at one in Israel a few years ago when she was getting an award at the King David Hotel. I attended the ceremony. She's brilliant, and she was very clearly saying that Israel's policy of appeasing Hamas is now at an end. Israel, like the United States, has had a left which has wanted to appease Iran, thinking that they could win favor from, Iran and all the really violent terrorists who hate Israel. And over the weekend with this attack, I think it was clear. In fact, the Wall Street Journal was writing an article that they published, I believe, on Sunday, saying that Iran helped plot the attack over Israel in the past several weeks. The terrorists came in by land, sea, and air. They actually had these little kind of one-person helicopters that they landed in, going across the border wall. And with the hundreds of Hamas, only purpose for it was to murder Israelis. And they did all kinds of things with crossing various checkpoints, getting into Israel, breaking through fences, etc. And once they were inside, they were motorized. They had motorcycles, various vehicles, and they just killed. Their whole purpose was simply to come in and kill Jews. Now, Israel, of course, is going to retaliate. They started retaliating over the weekend. The retaliation was first aimed at going after some of the leaders who had planned this attack and the hierarchy of Hamas. Hamas has been a radical organization for a long time. It's been supported by Iran. Iran has been supporting Hezbollah in Lebanon in the north. Hezbollah will undoubtedly begin attacking Israel as well. Israel will have a two-front war, at least with Hezbollah in the north and with Hamas in the Gaza Strip. They attacked maybe 8 or 9 different locations all through Israel yesterday. And there's a lot of video on this, and you can just basically see randomized killing. They had pickup trucks, they had motorcycles, they had helicopters, individual helicopters. They bulldozed down fence so they could come across the border. It was a complete surprise attack. I don't think U.S. intelligence or Israeli intelligence had any prior warning. It was and in the meantime, we've had Biden administration funneling $9 billion again to Iran and releasing prisoners, saying, isn't this wonderful? We're becoming now more moderation in Iran. There's no more moderation in Iran. Iran is determined to destroy Israel, has been saying so now for decades. And when the Bush administration did a certain amount to restrain Iran, but they were not willing to do anything that would be take out the Ayatollahs or destroy Israel's capability, Iran's capability to make nuclear weapons, which was advancing even under George W. Bush. So now you've got a situation where Iran is on the verge of having nuclear weapons. Hamas and Hezbollah, and there'll undoubtedly be attacks from the West Bank as well. All of this is a new war. And so a new war of this nature is going to have the potential to dramatically escalate, because Israel is going to do a massive retaliation. Israel is going to take the army, and they're going to go in and clean out Gaza. The left politics in Israel have been so tolerant, so assuming that they could coexist with Hamas, that they let Hamas get a major foothold in Gaza. And with that, Iran, with the additional money they have, after President Trump had essentially starved Iran by boycott, by all the sanctions against them selling oil, freezing their money, isolating them internationally. Well, the complete reverse course with Biden going back to the Obama State Department, CIA. This is the New World Order, bipolar world that we are going to allow weaken the power of the United States, which has been dramatically done. General Milley retired the other day. I thought he was a disgrace. He refused to take and allow President Trump to invoke the Emergency Act to send the military in 2020 when Antifa was destroying the streets of Portland, Oregon. That should have been put down. It was not. So I've been writing about this since 2006. In 2006, I'm going to show you, I wrote a book called Atomic Iran. This book right here, Atomic Iran. It did all right, but it was not anywhere near, Iran was not a subject on anybody's mind at this time, except for very few of us who were really concerned that Iran could and would have the potential to develop a nuclear weapon. And if they got one, they would use it on Israel. Israel is a one-bomb state. If Israel suffered one nuclear attack, even the size of the Hiroshima bomb, which was by today's standards not a very big atomic bomb, the state of Israel will be destroyed. So this book, I saw it when I was doing 2004, when I was doing the Unfit for Command with John O'Neill. I had stayed at the Key Bridge Marriott and was walking across the Key Bridge one day and looking back on Washington. And somehow I just stopped in the middle of it. I saw a vision of Washington destroyed by a nuclear attack. And that's when I decided to write the book on Iran. So I've written 3 books now on Iran. I've spent a lot of time in Israel. I've talked with the leadership, and they're aware of the issue. But this could escalate into a nuclear war. It has the real potential to do so. If Israel attacks massively in Gaza and then retaliates against Iran with an airstrike, the Biden administration will consider that to be asymmetrical response. In other words, disproportionately violent for what was done in the initial Hamas attack. And of course, this is part of the strategy of a country like Iran, is to make Israel into the villain by defending Jews, by defending Israel. Now, when I was in Israel, I had a discussion with General Yalon, who at that time was the vice prime minister, vice premier, or vice prime minister, really, of Israel. And we were talking about Ezekiel 37:38, about what certainly sounds like a nuclear war between Iran and Israel. And the way that passage is written sounds like God intervenes and the state of Israel is not destroyed. But it'll be a massive conflagration if it happens. And it could easily escalate into a thermonuclear war that would involve Russia and the United States, or possibly China moves on Taiwan in the middle of all this chaos. But it's an extremely dangerous time. We have now Ukraine, and again, the State Department had, going back to 2014 with the Maidan revolution, had deposed Yanukovych, who was a duly elected president of Ukraine, who was favorable to Russia. He fled the country. And ever since that, and it started in 2013 with Hillary Clinton taking money from Pinochet, who was a oligarch in Ukraine, into the Clinton Foundation. That was her goodies. And Biden came into Ukraine to clean up and get his money from Burisma with his son. And the State Department and Soros had engineered the Maidan revolution or rebellion in order to push Ukraine into NATO to destabilize that area, whereas Russia felt that was a direct threat to Russian sovereignty to have NATO at its border, and just as we would feel with missiles in Cuba, which we did in 1962. So between Israel now at war, Ukraine at war, and the potential for war in Taiwan any day, the world is in turmoil. It certainly looks to me like the beginning of World War III. And I pray that's not the case, because a thermonuclear war could occur with the Biden administration. Biden was kind of at the beach. I mean, where was Biden throughout all this? Except with John Kerry, who, by the way, I point out in this book, John Kerry, I have a whole section on it, said, but we should give nuclear weapons to Iran to see what they would do with them. Well, we know what they would do with them. They'd make a bomb out of them. And now, with all the agreements made by Obama, followed up by the agreements made by Biden, we put Iran on the path of heading towards a nuclear war that these mullahs, the ruling clerics, have stated for decades that they would do. Craig, do you want to comment on this? I think it's one of the more serious moments in history where we are edging into this kind of a conflict.
Well, not only that, for years upon years, since the Obama administration, people on the right side were railing against the idea of giving Iran this money. All we heard was, well, we owe them this money. This is theirs. We'll watch them. We'll keep a good eye on them. They never could. And I even heard Obama say, hey, really, when we give the money to them, I can't really control what they do. Joe Biden demanded, or Joe Biden doubled down recently, saying, we'll keep a good eye on them. So did Antony Blinken. So did Milley. They were saying, oh, don't worry, Iran should have this money back. It's theirs. They won't do anything. We'll keep a good eye on them. We'll make sure they don't put money into a nuclear program. Well, okay. What about anything else? Apparently, they use this to facilitate terrorist attacks. This is an issue. It was an issue beforehand. We all knew it, but the push to give them the money was directly from the left. Another group who was trying to destroy their own nation from within. Well, what do you expect?
We funded this we funded this attack, and we will quickly unfund Israel if Israel doesn't stay on a leash.
Yes.
And we've done this before. Even George W. Bush did it before. And it's at a very dangerous point. Let us keep moving. I want to cover a lot today because there's been a lot of news over the weekend. We could spend the whole show talking about Iran. I'd be happy to do it, but I want to move on. There's too much more to cover. The next story I want to talk about is I want to do a couple things on the economy. But first, I want to talk about oil could spike north of $150 a barrel. It's one of the major implications from this conflict. So in response to the kind of sudden attack of Israel, what Hamas has launched, you're going to see destabilization. And there's a reduced probability of Saudi-Israeli normalization and the associated boost to Saudi production. Saudi Arabia has told the White House it would be willing to boost oil production early next year if crude prices are high. The escalating conflict in Gaza reduces the likelihood of a near-term normalization in Saudi-Israeli relations. The Saudis are Sunni, and the Iranians are Shiite. The Shiites are a very radical but small subgroup in Islam that believe this Mahdi, the difference between the two is the Sunnis believe that the rightful leadership of Islam is secular, like Turkey, which had a caliphate, whereas Iran believes it has to be one of the family of the Prophet Muhammad. So this young boy, one of the descendants of Muhammad, went down the well. Went into hiding hundreds of years ago. And what the Shiites believe is when he comes out of the well, there will be an apocalypse and Shiite Islam will triumph across the world. Now, that's a very dangerous religion, which is predicting an apocalypse and wanting the apocalypse in order to succeed. Now, if oil does go to $150 a barrel on this tension again in the Middle East, and again, Iran will probably increase to some extent its production, but only slightly. It has been increasing from January to right now it's about 3.2 million barrels a day that Iran is producing. And by January 2024, they'll probably get up to 3.25 million barrels, but that's not enough to make up a drop if the Saudis pull back. And again, this is an attack that Iran helped to plotted against Israel. So the way Israel sits right now, it's in a precarious position because this is an attempt to destroy Israel and wipe it out. This has been going on since 1948 when the State of Israel was created in recent time by President Truman deciding to partition Palestine, and the State Department opposed Truman doing so at the time. And so did the CIA and so did the U.S. military. General George Marshall, who had stayed in Washington and was the kind of the supreme commander over Eisenhower or the other generals, told Truman that if he did allow Israel to be created, George Marshall would never vote for another Democrat. And Truman told him to do what he had to do. Truman made the decision. It was a biblical decision. And these are end times type of events going on right now. I do think oil will go up dramatically. I've said I just foresee oil going to $200 a barrel. If it does so, it'll be economically ruinous. And those are the next stories I want to cover because this political turmoil is going to cause economic turmoil. So let's immediately go to the next story, which I'm watching the housing market very carefully because, again, the housing market, the commercial real estate market is where I think we're going to have a bubble burst that'll be like 2008. The 30-year fixed mortgages are now up to 7.5%. I expect they'll hit 8% pretty soon. That puts the price of a house in terms of paying the monthly mortgage out of range for many families in the middle class. And people are sitting on their current mortgages if they have a mortgage at 0 or 1 or 2%. Why give that up? Stay in the house because you can't find a cheaper place in terms of the monthly mortgage. This type of a bubble is because prices have not yet come down. They've come down slightly, but they're going to have to come down dramatically. When they come down dramatically, you'll have a double whammy. People will be sitting on a mortgage they can't afford and a house they can't sell for what to pay off the bank fully because they have a bigger mortgage outstanding than the value of the house when they sell it. Their equity in the house will not be sufficient to pay the amount of equity the bank has outstanding in the form of a loan. Remember, a loan to a bank is an asset. And as those properties begin to fail, which they will in an escalating energy price environment, and we have two pressures now on energy. One is the war in the Middle East. The second is all of the green switching from hydrocarbon fuels to wind and solar, which is increasing the price of energy worldwide in the developed countries. We're at a point where the United States is intentionally deconstructing. It's intentionally taking steps by our leadership, starting with Obama, that would weaken the United States. And this is all part of the neo-Marxism. My book on that will be out here in a few days, which is the truth about neo-Marxism, cultural Maoism, and anarchy, which is where we're headed. We're headed into anarchy right now, which is the goal of this radical left. They want to destroy. They want to negate the culture, destroy families, destroy belief in God. That's the book. Truth About Neo-Marxism, Cultural Maoism, and Anarchy. I think it's going to be an important read if you want to understand how the left has a fundamentally different understanding of reality. They live in a Hegelian world in which the only way to create the utopia is to destroy capitalism, which means attack the culture of capitalism. It means attacking Enlightenment thinking, attacking the idea that there is truth and falsity that's objective. Instead, they posit a reality that, as John Lennon imagined, a world with no police. Well, we're seeing a world with no police. A world with no police is not safe. So I'm predicting that we're going to see a massive global downturn. And now that this war has started, I'm even more certain of it than ever. That's why I solidly recommend you can get this book free. It's on the homepage, How the Coming Global Crash Will Create a Historic Gold Rush. For those listening and others, here's the number to call. It's the number for Swiss America. Talk to them about investing in gold and silver, precious metals. Silver, by the way, is reasonably cheap. I think right now gold at about $1,850 an ounce is cheap. I think it's going to double in price given what we're going to go through now in this global chaos that is inevitable. The number is 800-519-6268. Get a free copy of this book. Call 800-519-6268. I'll say that one more time because I think it's important you get it. Read this book. What's going on now, I predict in this book that we're going to have a de-dollarization, that the price of energy is going to skyrocket, that we're going to see commercial real estate and private real estate crash. 1-800-519-6268. Get a free copy of the book. Okay, let's move on to the next story, which is in many ways related, because what is coming out now is that this Blackrock, and Blackrock is one of the major investment firms in the world. They manage a huge amount. They manage trillions of dollars. And what BlackRock is doing right now, Larry Fink, who is its head, who is a moderate Democrat, he's 70 years old. He has had a long history on Wall Street of being a successful investor. But what's happening is that the firm has seen a reaction against this ESG investing, which is environment, social, and governance. It's a investing for the green energy, for solar and wind. They want every corporation in the country to have to be resolved to reduce their carbon emissions in order to get to net zero carbon emissions. And there's been a tremendous reaction against this for several reasons. Number one is ESG investing means less money for investors because you pay a price to get this ESG investing. Instead of investing in companies that have the highest returns, you're investing in the companies that are politically most correct. And those may not be the ones returning the best dollar on investments. So investors who especially have their retirement money in this, and by the way, get some of your retirement money in gold. What's building here is going to be a stock market crash. And there's many who are saying, again, it's going to be unavoidable. I expect the stock market will go down this week given the war and the likelihood that we're going to see increased prices of oil. Many are now picking up on what Chairman Powell of the Federal Reserve said, that we're going to have higher interest rates longer because they consider this their new neutral. In other words, at 5 or 6% interest rates, inflation won't skyrocket and unemployment won't plummet into depths. So it's just kind of keeping a balance between two catastrophes. And it wants to keep that longer, which means that the Fed cannot control inflation. It's run out of its ability to use monetary policy to make any difference at all, especially with fiscal policy, with the Treasury just printing money, trillions of dollars being printed in deficit spending. So we're at a crisis point, and the crisis point is one that This next story, which is what kind of these all fit together today in my mind, which is this is what was written by one of the Bjorn Lomborg, who I admire. He's a good writer on climate change. He does believe in climate change, but he's not willing to bet everything. For instance, a G20 report calls for raising $3 trillion and spending only a fraction of it to help the poor. He's really a traditional liberal. He wants to help the poor. But he's gone along with the climate change, is simply saying that we've got to realize how much of the world is still in poverty. And well-off nations, I'm going to read a little paragraph or two. Well-off nations seem to have forgotten that while they're no longer plagued by poverty-related ills such as hunger and illiteracy, most people in the world still are. Increasingly, the Biden administration and leaders of other high-income countries are putting climate policy ahead of these core development issues. When the World Bank and International Monetary Fund hold their annual meeting next week, an unholy alliance of green activists and climate-anxious politicians will push them to devote a plethora of new resources to climate change. Now, that's a concern to someone like Lomborg, and it should be a concern to everyone, because the fact is that if we have decarbonization, and it's not clear decarbonization will do anything to control the climate. The idea that we can control the climate is fairly fanciful. Carbon dioxide is a small percentage of molecules, 0.04, 0.035 to 0.04% of the atmosphere. And if we reduce carbon dioxide too much, under about like 150 parts per million, plants won't grow. We need carbon dioxide in the atmosphere in order to maintain the green earth. And the idea that this is the force that's the turning knob of the Earth's temperature, which is based on this silly hockey puck graph that Michael Mann came up with. The world's temperature was perfect until we got to the Industrial Revolution. Then we started burning hydrocarbon fuels. Then, like the blade of a hockey stick, the Earth just suddenly started heating up excessively, causing mass storms and hurricanes and other climate catastrophes. This is predicated on scare. Climate catastrophes. It's like climate porn. I mean, it's like fear this and fear this. We've always had storms, always had hurricanes. Earth's temperature is not controlled by carbon dioxide. It's more controlled by the sun. It should be obvious. The reason we have greenhouse gases is at night, you might notice it's dark. Why is it dark? It's because the sun isn't in the sky. Why is that? Because the Earth rotates. As it rotates on the axis on a 24-hour basis, we are moving away from the sun in the nighttime, heading back into the sun. That's what we call morning. Shouldn't be hard. But at night, without greenhouse gases, the irradiance that the Earth traps during the day from the sun would escape into outer space. This place would freeze, and it would be uninhabitable. Water vapor is 70% of all greenhouse gases. The green movement does not demonize water vapor. Water vapor is not clouds. There's moisture in the air. These are fundamental ideas, and what Bourne is saying, like a continuing enlarging, more and more people are saying it, is that the cost of going to net zero isn't worth it, because it will cause too much economic pain. It will certainly destroy the middle class. If it destroys the middle class, it's going to be more political instability. We're at a point where I think the deconstruction of our fundamental values has reached a point of critical mass, where the mainstream media, which is largely still CIA controlled, and our own organizations, the CIA, the EPA, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals just ruled in the past few weeks that the EPA was out of line demonizing ivermectin in COVID. Why? Because doctors have the right to prescribe off-label any medication that's FDA approved for any illness. For the FDA to come in and say you can't use ivermectin for COVID was the FDA telling doctors what to do. That was overstepping their legislative authority. And the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals was right. Yet they still did it, and they still continue to suggest that ivermectin is dangerous. When you have government agencies who are no longer regulating for health, but are regulating in order to get money to the pharmaceutical companies, when the arms dealers and the arms manufacturers are making a fortune on all the war going on right now, it's their payday. When Biden administration's corrupt, and our, you don't have stability because our politicians are, we just got rid of Kevin McCarthy. Well, now there's going to be a fight over who's going to be the next House leader. It's not going to be Donald Trump. I'm sure Donald Trump does not want the position. You've got to know a lot about parliamentary law, Robert's rules, as applied to the way the House of Representatives interprets those rules. And it's a very boring process unless you like parliamentary procedure. And it's a matter of trying to herd cats to get your coalition together on votes. It's a very complicated process in the House and the Senate, legislatively. And Trump is not necessarily a guy for that kind of detail. But the point is that chaos is in the Congress. We don't have effective leadership. Biden's out of it. We don't know who's running the country, except the suspicions are growing that it is Obama. Craig, do you want to comment on all this?
I still remember the time back when Obama was president, when the commentators on our side were saying, hey, it looks like Biden's pulling the strings. It can't be Biden or Obama. There are people above them pulling the strings. I know we joke about the deep state. It's not a joke. There's somebody handling these people and pushing these agendas that I don't know if I don't even know if one man could even say this is something I want to do. They just want to go down in history as a president doing something that will look good on paper, and that's it. I don't see any change to this unless we keep voting people into the presidency that are outside of the Beltway on a regular basis.
Well, I think
that's the argument for Trump as speaker. It's not going to. It would be a symbolic move more than anything else, but that's the argument for Trump as speaker.
The point is, we're beyond being able to say if we elect the right president, we'll solve the problem.
No, the president doesn't have enough power for all that stuff either.
It's too endemic. It's too corrupt. We have a system that's broken.
Right.
At this point, we're bankrupting the United States rapidly to where our money is going to become worthless as we keep printing money. We can't stop. We're in a Cloward pivot moment. We can't stop the spending because there's too much non-discretionary spending in the federal budget where we have to spend on Medicare, Medicaid, whether we can afford it or not.
ACHA. Don't forget the ACHA.
Well, Obamacare.
Mm-hmm.
And the point is that that's going to continue. And no one knows how to fix it. The EPA, these agencies, unelected officials making policy. Again, how do you stop them from doing that? My solutions would be, move the entire bureaucracy to the Mojave Desert, give them all the solar and wind they want. Maybe they can cool their Quonset huts. But the point is, these are solutions which show how broken the system is. And right now, as it's a combination of forces, the CIA, the military industrial complex, which thrives on war and thrives on, I saw a little clip over the weekend of Julian Assange trying to point out that people don't want to fight wars. No population really wants to go to war, but it's the propaganda from the government controlled agencies pumping out messages through the media that demonize and cause hate and move populations to go to war. And these are the military industrial complex, which Eisenhower warned us about in his farewell speech in 1959, is dominant. And their interests are war, because that's how they make money.
That's right. Even Linus warned us about the military industrial complex. Back in the old Peanuts comics, when Charles Schultz inserted a lot of politics into them, you'd hear Linus talking about the military industrial complex. And that's poignant for a 6-year-old, by the way. But having said
Well,
that, this is something that was just a phrase and considered a far left idea for so many years, even though it came from Eisenhower. And we realized, hey, what, 50, 60, oh, I'm sorry, 80 years later, it was 80 years later, we're saying, oh my gosh, he's right. This is
well,
horrible.
I
It's too
said that
late.
I was a kid. I said at the time he was
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
I mean, it was and I wasn't far left at that point. I've never been far left in my
right.
life, but he was right
Yes.
because and certainly when John Kennedy came into the presidency, the military-industrial complex wanted to go to war with Cuba, and they were happy to go to nuclear war with Russia because they thought we had an advantage.
They went to war with Kennedy, I'll tell you that.
Well, I'll be having a book on that very quickly here.
Good segue.
And the nature of all this is, and I'm writing as much as I can right now. I thought for a while I was going to retire, but obviously I have not, and I'm going to be becoming more active to write and to speak out and to do things as much as I can to get the word out that these are dangerous times, and the solutions are not easy solutions. We've allowed the entire process to get far away from the Constitution, and I'm not even sure the Supreme Court is going to be a backstop. We have one judge now who can't tell you who a woman is, and the idea that the Supreme Court did not litigate the 2020 election. They did not take a case where the states implemented rules for the federal presidential election that some administrator made up, election official or a governor or some board of elections or whomever, where the Constitution says the rules for a presidential election have to come from the state legislature. That wasn't done. That should have been litigated. The Supreme Court should have heard that case. I know the Supreme Court doesn't like to get involved in politics, but these are fundamental issues of whether the Constitution is going to be upheld or not. By the way, the Supreme Court also, I believe this weekend, did not take this case to disqualify Donald Trump from being on the ballot on the 14th Amendment because he was a traitor. So again, not taking that case is significant because it suggests that not only does the Supreme Court not want to decide the case, but they don't think there's a basis there. They understand what the 14th Amendment was intended to do as post-Civil War legislation, which is mainly to keep the Confederates from getting political position, as they had been rebels and went to civil war to try to destroy the government. And the Congress and the people in passing that amendment did not want the Confederates assuming top government positions. That's very different than today. Today, Donald Trump is being tried under the Espionage Act, on the federal crimes. Espionage Act was 1917. Eugene Debs was imprisoned on that for giving a speech in Dayton, Ohio, in 1917. It became a First Amendment issue. What right do you have to speak? And in Whitney v. California, 1924, I think, or 26, Supreme Court Justice Brandeis said to be a crime under the Espionage Act, it has to be an imminent, real danger. It can't just be somebody saying, it has to be like publishing troop movement data in the newspaper. It has to be really a danger. So right now we're faced with a situation where I think the country is in dire need of mature leadership, and I'm not certain we're going to get it. Any final word, Chris, as we wrap up?
Oh, we definitely need mature leadership, but the fact is, the electorate has to take the responsibility as well. I understand that every year it's no longer Republican versus Democrat. At this point, it's the pragmatists versus the emotionalists. There are people who just want to vote on emotion and virtue signaling and make themselves feel better, and that population has grown exponentially. On the other hand, there are people who say, "Well, you know what? We have to fix the nation. We have to make things happen," but these people are dwindling in numbers. The so-called pragmatists, the ones that are saying, "Well, let's put it. I don't really like this guy's personality, but his policies are pretty good." You're not going to see that anymore. I hate to put it this way. This could destroy the country. Emotionalism, when it comes to voting, and of course, running the country, running the nation, is going to destroy our republic.
I still want to emphasize that I don't think this fixes it. I think it's so broke that I really think it's going to take a divine intervention at this point to get this straightened around.
A generational mentality change.
Well,
Hillary Clinton says we should be educated. The fact is, maybe her followers should not be re-educated, but at least maybe adjust their attitudes a little bit.
well, when the majority of the youth are indoctrinated into neo-Marxism and they want to run a cultural revolution, which is what they're asking for, the country is going to go through chaos, and it's going to be broke almost beyond repair, where they called in World War II FUBAR, messed up beyond repair, or, snafu, situation normal, all messed up. And so therefore, as we wrap this up, I still have confidence, as dark as all this looks. I believe there are enough people around still holding faithful to God, and I think the solution is biblical. 2 Chronicles 7:14. Those of us who do believe in God have to get on our knees and ask God's forgiveness for allowing God to be taken out of our lives, out of our schools, out of our public squares, for allowing so many babies to be cut to pieces and murdered in the womb. These are violations of God's law. And what's going on right now in the Middle East is a biblical conflict. These are powers and principalities we're fighting. These are major forces of evil. The forces of hell have been allowed to roam wild for a while. And it won't be forever. God's judgment will come. And I foresee possibilities of that judgment being very harsh. But if enough of us follow the wisdom of 2 Chronicles 7:14, God will hear our prayer and heal our land. And I think that this crisis is a threshold point where the human race can decide whether we're going to have 1,000 years of peace and flourishing, or we're going to essentially go down the path of thermonuclear war, and we'll be self-destructive, not because of climate change. And I assure you that with what's coming, climate change is going to be a lot less important than feeding your families and paying your rent, which may become increasingly difficult for the middle class. This is Dr. Jerome Corsi. I say in the end, God always wins. God will win here too. And we need to do our part to let God know that we are on God's side. This is Dr. Jerome Corsi. Today is Monday. It's October 9th, 2023. We're broadcasting on the truthcentral.com every weekday. We're on many channels: BitChute, Rumble, on Apple Podcasts. You can find in the upper right-hand corner all the different places where we're posting on social media, and we intend to become more active in the coming months. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow. God bless.